Ani, Bojo, Kwekwe, it's Catherine at Moonstarlodge, and today I'm doing a bit delayed VR to Simon at the Hermit's Cave, and the tag, excuse me, the tag is my workhorse decks. As I've mentioned in other videos, I have a collection that I have curated since 1974. Approaching 1,300 decks and about 150 reference books. I am very keen on the history of tarot and the evolution of the symbology and the evolution of the, how can I put this, the involvement of this, moving from a mystery school kind of esoteric temple realm to, mass market, mass culture phenomenology. I don't agree with everything that's evolved into the mass market, and it's very important to me personally that I keep the history intact and expand my knowledge of each card, including my own training in psychology, and as a spiritualist minister, I'm a medium, so I channel with the cards at times, but I'm interested in the archetypes and the progression of things like the Myers-Briggs personality variants as they are represented in the cards, and all sorts of technical things, because for me the cards relate to personal growth. They help us find that sense of self that's important. So the clients I see and the readings I do here on YouTube reflect the sense of coming back to the why and helping people to come out of that place of spiritual narcolepsy and connect with their higher good. No one knows us better than we ourselves, and staying connected with our higher self, our soul, is really important. So to that end, I've written down in my skanky little notebook here the 7 categories that Simon used. Shadow work is the first deck, the cards I would use for shadow work. The second is inner child work. Third is pathworking. Fourth is personal growth and development. The fifth is ride or die. The sixth is hello again. So referring to a deck I've used in the past and kind of let slide, and now I'm using again. And then a hello there deck. So without further ado, I'm still going to have my little notebook here because it's important to me. And please know that I don't use decks just by themselves. If there's some companion oracles and things, I pull that all together. So you'll be seeing perhaps 2 and 3 decks representing one category, if it's by the same author with the same intentional kind of flow, if you will call it that. So let's go to the cards. So my shadow work deck now, after being in this business since 1974, there was a plethora of decks about shadow work in the 80s with the psychology work and my degree. But the Shadowland Tarot by Monica Badirsky is my current favorite deck on shadow work. She developed it for that reason, and many of you know her work. It's playful. It's not dramatic in a negative way. It's dramatic, there's no question, but I mean it is not frightening. It allows you to step into the cards and see them for an opportunity to look past the symbols in the cards that we currently see. They're not Rider-Waite-Smith in the sense of what's being pictured per se. I work with this deck a lot. I have a high degree of respect for Monica Badierski. I communicate with her, and it's really, really nice to see that. Now, in addition to those cards of Monica's, I also use, if I can keep from dropping them on the floor, I use her Shadowland Lenormand, which is a fairly recent publication. And so in the same art style, the same kinds of backs, you can see that these are classic Lenormand. So we've got sun, bouquet, coffin, and I use these cards with the tarot when I'm working on shadow work, because sometimes the Lenormand cards are a little more blunt, and if I'm struggling with a shadow aspect, which we can do if we're really having difficulty seeing something, it's important to know that you have blunt and direct. And the other deck that I work with Monica's stuff, I won't take the time to take them out, but it's the Bat Blood's Ink Oracle. Oh, maybe I will take them out. These you need to get from Monica directly, but when she published her Lenormand sequence of decks, she always added, except in the first iteration, she added 6 cards. So she published this deck, I believe, last year, and she took all the variations. So she had 5 editions of her Shadowland Lenormand, and she took all the extra cards, let's turn this around, and made this Bat's Blood Ink deck. And it's a gorgeous deck, a little smaller than the others, but it's a beautiful deck to work with. So when I'm doing serious shadow work for myself or a client who I know, I will pull all 3 kinds of decks out: the Bat's Blood Ink, the Shadowland Lenormand, and the Shadowland Tarot. So hands down, that's become my fave. Now I'm going to ask my Juan the Pool Boy director, Brian, here to take that away so I have room to work. My Inner Child work deck. There's a couple that I work with depending whether I'm coming from a place of feeling wounded. As an Indigenous person, if you follow the news, you will know that we've had a lot of difficulty with cultural genocide, colonial oppression, and I run into the racism and the issues associated recently with finding the buried babies at the residential school. We've just had the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit Day. And this is an Indigenous deck, and it's called The Star That Never Walks Around. And so I've had this deck for a long time. I don't know that it's still in print, but it works with not the classic minors. You need to see this in the eyes of an Indigenous person. So it's a very gentle deck, but it's very clear. It doesn't pull any punches. So I love this deck, and when I'm doing my monthly new moon and full moon readings, I pull it out with it or some of the other Indigenous decks. But this isn't just for moon work. This is very much for inner child work. And the other deck that you may question, but it works for me, is Anything by Kim Krans. So we have her Animal Spirit deck. I have her Archetypes deck, and if I can lay my hands on it, somewhere here in this great mess, What did I do with it? There it is, right here. And this is her Wild Unknown Tarot. So, again, see this as a gestalt. Why I use this for myself and for others is for inner child work. The animals help. There are no people in any of these decks. There are representations in part of people in the Archetypes deck, but you have things like the hands, and there's more hands. You have parts of people, maybe an eye, that sort of thing. It's a suggestion of people without people. I work with autistic kids. I work with people with some serious mental health issues in my practice. And so these cards are very helpful. So these are the animal cards here. Again, some of these cards speak to my Indigenous heritage and some of them do not. But the animals are not as threatening as some of the people images. So here we have the tarot down here. I do use reversals, even though some decks don't call for reversals or the author didn't intend for reversals. I still was taught to use reversals. So in terms of inner child work, I use this conglomerate of decks. And that's been a real revelation. I've enjoyed Kim Cran's work. Please ignore the howling cats. The Serenade is by Nimke, Thunderfoot, Polydactyly, Bad Cat. So, Brian, can you just take these off to the side? Just making space here, kids. Okay. The next category from Simon is Pathworking. My Pathworking deck is a fairly new deck, but the concepts are not new. So this is a deck by Carrie Paris. It's called the Relative Tarot. And how I pathwork with this deck, this is a very unique thing. The entire book, it's not about descriptions of the cards as much as it is about the numerology of how we get things like our life number and our path number and that sort of thing. But it's a lot of vintage photos, and when I pathwork, I put myself in the position of the person represented. Now, having said I'm not a lover of decks with a lot of people in them, this has been quite eye-opening to me. So, you know, there are some actual famous folks here depicted in these decks. Now, this is a lover's card with alternate characters. You've got 3 choices. I can go into these cards and actually put myself in the situation and go as if I am this character. It's wonderfully expansive, and I'm trying to figure out where they're going. This has been a very helpful deck, and it's one of the ones I use. I use the Spacious Tarot as well. I didn't bring it out today, but this Relative Tarot has been an extraordinary help for me, and so I use that for pathworking, to my amazement. So, thank you. Personal growth and development. This is an interesting thing for me. I've been working on and off for years with Raven Phelan's Dreams of Gaia. Again, it's a deck that has a lot of people images, and they're computer generated in a lot of instances. Some of them are very direct. Now, in Indigenous culture, we are taught not to stare people or look people in the eye, that it's considered rude. So some of these images, when they stare at me, especially the larger faces, I found it intimidating. And I knew that because it struck me that way, that there were some things I needed to face. And that's been important. So I have worked with this deck. Like this is Emotion, Intellect. Now, interestingly, Raven's decks don't follow exactly Thoth, they're not Marseille, and they are not Rider-Waite-Smith. So it's interesting to me to learn a new system, and I've enjoyed working with these cards. Now, I've enjoyed working with them more for personal growth, personal development. When I added in some very recent additions to her series. The two recent additions, what did I do with them? There's the two messenger decks. Oh, there they are. Okay, sorry. So this one, the Messenger Oracle, this is the oracle that goes with those cards. The faces are even larger, and the cards themselves aren't the same size. But some of these, like this image of this bear, for example, very direct, look you in the eye kind of stuff. This image here, share your thoughts. This is actually a creature. Very lovely cards, and I can get caught up in this. I did do some path working. Here's a Be Honest. That's an incredible card. There is a face in this card too. The source of all. So some of these figures, the eyes are open and some are closed. This is a beautiful card, Trust in Magic. So I love this deck, and I love Raven's decks. I love all of them. What's interesting, this one has people and animals. And this is the latest one. This is the Seeker. This is the Messenger, and this is the Seeker. And so there's more images. This is a dragon, the king. So the backs are the same. They could be integrated into one deck. But I find that this is a very good deck for me. Personal growth. What did I do there? I think I've mixed up the books. Technical goof up here. That's the Messenger. This is the Seeker. Okay. Raven is very clear, and I know that having read about her, she's gone through her own issues. My Ride or Die deck is a surprise to me, but it would not be to any of my clients. It's the Naked Heart deck by Jillian C. Wilde. It's there we go. That's the right way around. Naked Heart. I found I use this for myself. Probably I've used this in all the categories so far. I've used it for path working. I have used it for personal growth. I've used it for shadow work. But when I am working with it, I have to use it with the Antiquities of Magic. Now, these are cards that go beyond what we would see in a Lenormand deck. I'm just going to push that up there. There are no people in this deck. This is all animals. So here's your Innocence of Wands. There's your Ten of Swords. There's your Tower to Tree. Here's your Four of Pentacles. And so on. All animals. And they are stunningly depicted. I love from an Indigenous perspective that the Spirit of Pentacles is your king. It's a buffalo. The Heart of Wands or the Queen of Wands is a fox. And so on. It's a gentle deck. It's meant to get to the heart of the matter. And these cards are based on the symbology of the Rider-Waite-Smith. So if you look for symbols within those decks, you'll find that she's spelled them out here. So you can use that as an oracle. And additionally, when I'm using these cards, this is a take my money moment. Jillian, just take my money. She did have a spreadsheet that you could, like a cloth, but made of paper in the deck. And I consider it too fragile to keep opening it and spreading it out. So what I did do was I bought her cloth and I put it in my old BlackBerry case because it fits. So there's the cloth. I won't unfold it. These are the Antiquities of Magic expansion cards that relate to astrology. There's just 12 astrology cards there. And then there's a booklet of spreads to go with the cloth. So I have all these aspects now of this particular deck, and I know she's working on another deck. This is Ride or Die. This is Ride or Die for me personally. This is Ride or Die for my clients. I have so many decks, but that's important to me. So my Hello Again deck is, just a minute here. You have to excuse me, I have rheumatoid arthritis, so reaching and grabbing things can be a bit of a shit show. So this is the Witch's Wisdom by Phyllis Curott. She's a lawyer in the U.S. and a woman in my age bracket. It's a deck, it's a Hay House mass market with a tremendously exquisite book. My Hello Again is I come back and forth to this deck over time, and the major arcana is actually depicted backwards. So it starts at the end of the cycle and works its way through. The cards are lovely. There are animals, there are people. It's very gentle. It's you know, it's Wiccan in its context. But I like the challenge of working with it, with the major arcana having, I believe, 25 cards and working backwards through the cycles, or through the cycle. It's one I come back and forth to because it's very deep. I find that I refer to the text a lot. I find that while it's gentle looking, it takes me to levels of understanding that are possibly karmic in past life. And so technically they could be considered something for personal growth, but it's definitely a hello again time for me, particularly since we're in the spring. We've just passed Beltane and that sort of thing. So it's a good deck to be hello again for me. I didn't bring out my hello. Oh. This is my other ride or die, sorry. It's the Antique Anatomy by Claire Goodchild. I have all the expansion decks possible, and there's one coming out in August, and I pre-ordered that. These are Toronto artists, or she's a Toronto artist, a Canadian, fellow Canadian, and I love these. As a spiritualist, I have worked with the dead, I've talked to the dead, I've been a nurse, I've worked with a pathologist dealing with the dead and being the voice for the dead. And these are wonderful pictures. This is a great tarot. I love it. And I use it. I use the expansion decks. This one is a Lenormand and an oracle. There's another 50 cards on top of the traditional 36. This expansion deck was Ancestors and Advisors. And this one was, or is, a general expansion pack, and the one that's coming out has astrological and time issues. So this is a workhorse deck, and I know that this is important to me. Now, so another couple of decks. This is a Hello Again deck for me, is Tarot of the Abyss by Anna Turin. I love this deck. I come back and forth to it as I find I need some support. Sometimes it's path working. It's never inner child. Sometimes it is shadow work. Some of the cards are very unusual, and I really like how she creates a perspective here. I like that there are alternate cards for things like the Three of Swords, which to me is a card of creativity. And sometimes you have to have that conversation with a person that's unpleasant, like it's a divorce or a firing, but you need to co-creatively work something through. It is still a card of creativity, and she addresses that. So I love this deck. I love the line drawing, so the art appeals to me, and I love that it speaks to me without yelling at me. And so it's a workhorse deck. It's Hello Again, and it's just a lot of things. Personal development, and I've broken every rule Simon established for this. It's okay, Brian, there's room. My last deck. No, it's not my last deck. This is my Hello There deck, and then I have two honorable mentions. My Hello There deck is my Spirit Keepers Tarot. It's by Benabel Wen. I've got the Revelation edition, the last edition. It's I've had it a few months now, and it's a numbered edition, so I don't think she's got any more on her website. Her terminology is different, so there's a learning curve here. Her kings are replaced by angels. It's heavy into the Kabbalah. So this is a study deck for me, and I work with it, and then I run into a situation where I have to stop and study what is being referenced here. So this is a Hello There deck. It still smells like the incense that it must have been packed in. And I love this deck by Benabel Wen. I find Benabel a very strong, capable, knowledgeable resource for a lot of things within divination. And so she's important to me. Now, the last two decks I have to discuss are not tarot, so these are honorable mentions. Wisdom of the Oracle came out around 2015, I believe, from Colette Baron Reid, and this is a well-worn copy of the deck, and I have an updated newer deck that's a little bit more diverse. I use this with clients, and I use this when I'm journaling. And so this is an important ride or die deck for me. I always keep a copy of it very close to hand. Sometimes it's on my table beside where I sit. Sometimes it comes upstairs. But when I'm working through a problem, this doesn't sugarcoat anything, but it's very complete. The workbook with this deck is complete, and I won't bother pulling cards. Well, maybe I'll give you a couple here because you can see I've used library tape to actually tape my book back together. The artwork is stunning, and so right there it helps you to think through issues from a creative perspective. And I love this deck, and I use it, and I use it, and I use it, and I suggest to my students that they use it to get to know themselves and to help themselves answer questions. The why they are choosing to do something is really important, and to answer questions like, is this in my best interest? You know. The other deck that's important to me is very similar in context to the Star That Never Walks Around. This is culturally significant. Now, I'm a practicing shaman and have been for a long time in my cultural tradition. And this is a deck that was put out by Dr. Alberto Villoldo, who is a medical doctor as well as a shaman, and Colette Baron-Reid again. And while this is general shamanism, not culturally specific, the overarching themes are, and this is important for a great deal of soul search and spiritual search for me. There was a previous deck that they did together, and it was the Shaman's Oracle, something like that. And I love it too. There's no question. But this one takes it even more deeply. I very much love this deck. Anyway, you can flip the camera, Brian. So dog nonsense aside, cat yowling aside, husband squeaking chair aside, and my confusion here, I hope that you enjoyed this VR, and it was a lot of fun. Miigwech, Yahweh, aho.